My name is Cameron Miller, and this is a reflection on the fifth Sunday of Easter, or after Easter, and comes to you from Trinity Place in Geneva, New York. And I want to begin with the poem From Blossoms by Lee Young Lee. From blossoms comes this brown paper bag of peaches we bought from the boy at the bend of the road where we turned toward signs painted peaches. From laden boughs, from hands, from sweet fellowship in the bins, comes nectar at the roadside, succulent peaches we devour, dusty skin and all. Comes the familiar dust of summer, dust we eat. Oh, to take what we love inside, to carry within us an orchard, to eat not only the skin but the shade, not only the sugar but the days, to hold the fruit in our hands, adore it, then bite into it, the round jubilance of peach. There are days we live as if death were nowhere in the background. From joy to joy to joy, from wing to wing, from blossom to blossom, to impossible blossom, to sweet, impossible blossom. From blossoms. Those wafer-thin petals of color now adorning trees all around us this spring. From those blossoms comes a brown paper bag full of late summer, dusty skinned, succulent peaches. Oh, Mama! Yes, the round jubilance of peach, says the poet, can make it seem as if death is nowhere in the background. Just life full of blossoms. Well, if I may, I want to wax a little bit theological. Not in an overly academic way or rationalistically, but more in the way of blossoms. The opposite of sacred, for instance, is not profane. The opposite of sacred is not bad or evil or nasty. The world, the creation, is not divided into sectors in which the sacred is a dimension we enter only if we are able to travel through the ugly profane like a Teflon pan and collect no debris. That's a medieval worldview, and in that worldview, the church becomes the gatekeeper and of the sacred, as well as the arbiter of all things sacramental. Well, we know how that story ends and how corrupt religion becomes when it assumes that role and people allow it to. The opposite of sacred, that boundary on that territory that gives sacred its definition, is commonness, ordinariness. It's not that the sacred is good and the common is bad, or that the sacred is pure and the ordinary is corrupt. We need to get rid of these false distinctions and these moral judgments as if we are to catch a view of the sacred from our perch here in the ordinary. We live in the ordinary, obviously, but we are fortunate enough to regularly brush up against the sacred. And like those blossoming trees, with fragrant scents wafting in the air all around us this spring, we are reminded of the presence of the extraordinary in life and the magnificence of creation. Oh, how truly blessed we are, living from joy to joy to joy to joy, from wing to wing, from blossom to blossom, to impossible blossom, to sweet impossible blossom. Even the common, even the most ordinary, is almost too gorgeous to behold, hearty with goodness and succulent with joy. But the sacred, when we glimpse it, will bring tears to our eyes and reduce our heart to a pure, quiet pulse. The sacred will hush even the rowdiest of those monkey minds. But we also know that while the sacred is not fragile, our hold on it is astonishingly delicate, like rice paper or those wafer-thin petals. The veil between the sacred and the ordinary will simply dissolve into nothingness if we are too rough with it or we hold on to it for too long. It is that very thin veil that actually allows us to glimpse God. It's the veil itself through which we sniff the holy and feel God's warm breath on the back of our neck. It is that thing between us, that veil between us, we may wish to get rid of, but it's that veil that actually allows contact at all, or near contact. Remember the story of Moses about when he caught a glimpse of God? Well, it turned his face into a brilliant light, and from then on, he had to wear a veil over his face. No one could look on Moses' face anymore after that. Elsewhere in the Bible, it warns that to look at God is a sure and certain death. Well, it's not a sure and certain death as in crime and punishment, as if we would have done something wrong by looking at God. It's more like Icarus flying too close to the sun. His wings melt. We just can't get that close to God without being obliterated. We need the veil in order to glimpse the sacred, just like we need special sunglasses in order to see a solar eclipse. Now, that can be maddening to creatures like us who don't like any limitations at all. But to be told, especially if we've been told we don't have a choice, but, that is our limit. It is as we are. And yet, think about some of the veils that we have available to us. Blossoms and other such exquisite works of nature. They become a veil for us through which we see the holy. They seem like ordinary old flowering trees that we see every spring until they aren't. Until we suddenly see them in a burst of sweet, delicate beauty and we gasp, and we see it. But we also make veils through which we catch a glimpse randomly sometimes and without regularity, but dependably, veils through which we get to glimpse the holy. We have veils that work a bit like a favored fishing spot. Sometimes we catch fish there, but not always. Veils that catch the light and form a rainbow sometimes, but not always. They're a little mysterious and can actually be very frustrating because they let us down as often, if not more, than they reveal the holy. I'm talking about veils like bread and wine and even water. We might rightly ask, with our most rational mind, how can such things work? How can rituals take something that 1 minute is quite ordinary and turn it into something the very next moment that is sacred? How does a blossom turn from an ordinary tree and flower into a spectacular presence of the holy in our midst? That's precisely how fragile the veil can be. How can bread, at one moment common flour and yeast baked into a crumbly whole, at the very next moment become a sacred food through which time and space is collapsed and even heaven and earth are enjoined? How can water, the most common of substances on the earth and the most elemental substance for life itself, be that clear, wet, thirst-slaking liquid 1 moment and the very next appear as a veil for the sacred? Well, you know the answer as well as I do. You. Or us. Like the shutter on a camera opens to regulate light entering through the lens. We open our minds or not. We open our hearts or not. We open ourselves or not. On one level, the rational level, these veils are all human creations. We construct them. We make them what they are. They're not magic. On the other hand, together, and it's always together, historically and communally together, we allow certain things to open us. We allow them to open us so that they can help us see and hear and feel what normally we seem to be insensitive to. We imbue certain moments. We imbue certain elements. We imbue certain people. We imbue certain texts. We imbue certain relationships with power to reveal the presence of God even in the ordinary. And here's the thing. If we do not imbue such things with power, we simply don't see. We simply don't know. And that's why there's a difference between receiving the communion as a symbol of something that happened sometime a long time ago and participating in communion as a transformative event. We look at the same, they look the same, but they're worlds apart. We cannot count on transformation taking place every time we receive communion, but we can count on something happening as a result of returning again and again and again and again, and being present with others in community as we share those moments. Something that some of us learned during the pandemic is that it can even happen when we are together but apart, like this. Whether blossoms or bread, the iris in the eye of a friend, or the iris in the weeds at the side of the road, ordinary things become the veil through which we glimpse the extraordinary, through which we glimpse the holy that is in our midst, even now. It's that simple act of posing with our hands open in vulnerability, waiting in anticipation, even somewhat awkwardly, while someone mumbles their way towards us and places in our open, exposed hands a tiny piece of bread and a tiny sip of wine. Week after week after week we do it, and the effect accumulates and it eats away at our arrogance. Week after week after week, the effect accumulates, and slowly the veil moves into a place, and then one week, suddenly, without warning, we see what was standing there all the time. Love. Love so deep, love so pervasive, love so abundant, and so completely without condition and impossible even to earn or to lose. Love. Present here in the field, all around us, all the time, within us and among us, so completely surrounding and imbuing us. Love. And then the veil is there and reveals it. And we are taken up in a joy. And joy to joy, from wing to wing, from blossom to impossible blossom, to sweet, impossible blossom. How is it that we can sit in the ordinary and see the sacred? Only because we allow ourselves to become so open. That's all. Just allowing that veil to appear, the one that was there all along, that allows us to see through to the sacred that is in our midst. How great is that? Peace be with you.